The shoreline was no longer quiet. By mid-afternoon, Gilgo Beach swarmed with investigators, technicians, drones tracing wide loops overhead, and officers combing every dune ridge and formation. Yet, the air carried an unsettling stillness, like the beach itself was holding its breath. Sergeant Dana Keller watched as the second crate was carefully uncovered. The junior officer who found it stood to the side, arms crossed, eyes locked on the sand as if afraid something was going to reach out from beneath it. A loose pattern was forming, even before the forensics team logged their measurements. The first crate had 2 dates painted on it, an older date tied loosely to one of the early disappearances, and a newer one, only weeks old. The second crate, it had a similar pair of markings, different dates, but the same unmistakable format, as if someone were tracking events the police didn't even know existed. Detective Michael Rourke approached Keller, reviewing the early notes on his tablet. "We're getting preliminary scans," he said quietly. "It looks like both crates were deliberately buried less than a foot beneath the surface. Not deep enough to hide forever, but deep enough to stay covered unless the wind shifted." Keller frowned. This wasn't about hiding them permanently. This was about timing. Someone wanted them found now. Rourke nodded, like an announcement. Nearby, a forensic technician called out, "Detectives, you need to see this." The team gathered around the second crate as its top layer was brushed clean. Beneath the painted dates, a small strip of adhesive tape clung to the wooden surface. On it, written in small block letters, were 3 words. "Not done yet." Keller felt her chest tighten. "They're taunting us." Rourke rested a hand on the crate. Steady calm. "Or they're warning us." The wording struck a nerve with everyone present. The original Gilgo case had left a deep scar on the region, years of searching, uncertainty, and fear. And even though the courts were still sorting through the charges tied to Rex Heuermann, the public conversation had shifted into a tense silence. Now, suddenly, someone was reigniting the story with surgical precision. The question was why. A young officer approached with a folder of preliminary digital forensics. "Sergeant Keller, we checked the missing woman's phone records and banking activity. Something strange turned up." "Strange how?" Keller asked. "She made a transaction at a hardware store 2 days before she disappeared. Zip ties, a small shovel, heavy-duty gloves, and a bag of sand." Keller's brow furrowed. "Sand?" "Yeah," the officer continued. "Same grade as the sand found over the first crate." Rourke crossed his arms. So either she was preparing something, or someone was using her accounts after she vanished. Keller stared toward the path leading back to the parking area, or she was being coerced. The deeper they looked, the more unsettling the possibilities became. The missing woman's car still hadn't been located. Her last known whereabouts placed her miles away from anyone connected to the original case. Her social media showed no sign of meeting anyone new, no threats, no troubled relationships. Everything about her life seemed stable, until the last 48 hours before she vanished. Keller pulled up her phone, scrolling through the early case briefings. "Mike, this doesn't feel random." She wasn't a drifter. She wasn't someone who would willingly come out here. Whoever brought her here planned this. And those crates, she paused, tapping the screen. It's like they're part of a sequence. Rourke leaned in, eyes sharp. "Yeah, a timeline, just like you said earlier. But if that's true, then we're already behind." As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the dunes, the temperature dropped sharply. Officers set up temporary floodlights, turning the once dark shoreline into a glowing grid of investigative zones. Reporters began gathering at the distant barrier, though they were kept far back. The hum of generators, the snap of camera shutters, the quiet murmur of detectives debating theories. It all blended with the constant crash of waves. Then Keller's radio crackled. "Units on the east perimeter, we have movement in the brush. Possible civilian or suspect." Keller and Rourke exchanged a quick glance, then sprinted across the packed sand. Officers behind them fanned out, flashlights slicing through the thick reeds. The brush rustled, snapping like something large was pushing through it. "Stop! Police!" Keller shouted, raising her light. The movement paused. then shifted, faster, deeper into the tall reeds. Officers pushed forward in formation, but the terrain was uneven, slowing them. Keller broke off to flank left, cutting through a narrow path created by years of tide erosion. Her boots hit a firm patch of earth, and she spotted it, a figure in dark clothing slipping between the brush. "Mike, to your right," she yelled. Rourke pivoted, flashlight catching a fleeting glimpse of a hooded shape. The figure darted toward the shoreline, feet kicking up bursts of sand. Officers surged forward, but before they could close the distance, the figure disappeared behind a dune ridge. Keller reached the top seconds later, only to find nothing. No footprints leading away. No sign of movement. Just disturbed sand and the soft roar of the ocean. Rourke climbed up beside her, breath steady but eyes troubled. They were watching us. Keller swallowed hard. "Not just watching," she said. "They wanted us to know they're here." Rourke looked back at the crime scene, the crates, the floodlights turning the beach into a stage. "And if they're following a timeline," he said quietly, "that means whatever comes next is already planned." Keller didn't respond, because at that moment, the realization sank in like a cold weight. Whoever orchestrated this wasn't finished. They were escalating, and they had a purpose, one the police hadn't yet understood. Night fell hard over Gilgo Beach, swallowing the dunes in a deep, uneasy blue. The floodlights hummed, casting long shadows across the sand, but even the artificial glow couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was still out there, studying every move the investigators made. Sergeant Dana Keller stood at the ridge overlooking the cleared crime scene, arms folded against the cold. Hours had passed since the brush movement and the chase that led nowhere. Officers were restless, scanning the dark horizon again and again. Drones continued their sweeps overhead, their faint buzz blending with the wind. Keller felt the weight of the beach pressing on her shoulders. The old case, the new clues, the crates, the vanished figure, and the growing certainty that they were dealing with someone who understood the terrain, the history, and the psychology of fear. Detective Michael Rourke walked up beside her. "We did a full sweep," he said. "Nothing. Whoever that was, they knew exactly where to run." "Which means they've been here before," Keller replied. Rourke nodded. "Probably more times than we can count." He held out a tablet. On it were side-by-side satellite images of the beach. One from years ago, one from just last week. Keller studied them. "What am I looking at?" "Subtle changes," Rourke explained. "The dunes shift naturally, but these patterns," he zoomed in on several circular areas, "are different, controlled. Someone's been manipulating the sand over time." Keller's breath caught, preparing areas, creating concealment pockets. Rourke lowered the tablet. The crates weren't random placements. They were part of a map. Keller stared out at the shoreline. "So what's the map pointing to?" "A center point," Rourke said. "Everything radiates from one area." Keller exhaled slowly, dread creeping up her spine. "Then we need to find that point before they do." The team mobilized instantly. Officers formed a wide semicircle, moving systematically toward the central zone identified on the satellite imagery. As they advanced, Keller's flashlight caught something ahead, a glint of metal beneath the sand, barely visible. "Here," she called. Rourke rushed over. Together, they brushed away more sand, revealing a thin metal pole with a small numeric tag attached, a land survey marker. Keller frowned. "This area was officially surveyed recently?" Rourke shook his head. "Not by any department I know." They uncovered another marker several feet away. Then another. A faint grid pattern emerged, precise, intentional. "It's a layout," Rourke whispered. "Someone's marking the ground." Keller's pulse quickened. "For what?" Minutes later, as the team uncovered the rest of the formation, a shape emerged, a long rectangle, nearly 20 feet across. A makeshift plot drawn by someone who had spent time here, calculating, preparing. Keller swallowed. "This isn't a burial site. It's a staging area." Rourke looked at her sharply. "Staging for what?" Before she could answer, another officer approached, holding out a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a phone, caked with sand but intact. "Found it buried 6 inches down near the east ridge," the officer said. "It was turned off." Keller took the bag carefully, run it through digital, full analysis. As the techs worked to power up the device, Rourke paced, thinking through every angle. This doesn't add up. Whoever's doing this is smart, patient, calculated. They're not rushing. They're guiding us. Toward what? Keller asked. The forensic technician suddenly called out from behind the evidence table. "We've got something." Keller and Rourke hurried over. The phone had finally powered on. A single video file sat on the screen. No messages, no contacts, no apps, just a file. Keller felt a knot form in her stomach. "Play it." The video opened to a shot of the shoreline. The shoreline, filmed during broad daylight. The camera panned slowly across the dunes, stopping on the exact spot where the crates had been buried. A calm, steady voice spoke over the footage. "You're late." Keller froze. Rourke leaned in, eyes wide. The voice continued, unhurried, almost conversational. "You missed the signs the first time. Years of searching, and still, you never checked here. The answers were always in the sand." Keller felt the cold biting deeper. The camera shifted again, showing a close-up of the tide rolling in. "Everything follows a pattern," the voice said, "even the mistakes." Then the camera moved to a new angle, a low, sweeping shot of dunes, and stopped on something partially buried. A thin wooden stake with fresh paint. "We leave what needs to be found," the voice murmured. "When it needs to be found." The final frame zoomed in on a freshly painted date. A date 3 days in the future. Then the screen went black. The forensic tech swallowed. "That means something scheduled." Rourke stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "We're not dealing with someone looking to evade. We're dealing with someone making a point. Someone orchestrating this like a timeline." Keller's voice was barely a whisper. "A countdown." Suddenly, another officer shouted from the perimeter. "Detectives, you need to see this now." Keller and Rourke sprinted across the sand. At the far edge of the search zone, illuminated by floodlights, stood a new crate, one that hadn't been there an hour earlier. Keller's heart thudded painfully. Rourke knelt beside it, brushing off the top layer of sand. Painted clean across the surface was a message in bold letters. "Stop digging." Keller stepped back, breath unsteady. "They were here, while we were all searching." Rourke looked up at her, eyes dark with realization. "This was never about the past," he said. "This was about what comes next." Keller stared at the message, the future date, the grid in the sand, the crates arranged like a warning. And the truth hit her with the weight of collapsing tide. Whoever was behind this wasn't running. They were leading, and the police were following the exact path they were meant to take. A shiver ran through the team as Rourke whispered the words no one wanted to say. 3 days, and they've already chosen a location. Keller exhaled, voice steady but shaking inside. "Then we stop them before their timeline ends." Behind her, the waves crashed harder than before, as if the ocean was echoing a warning. And somewhere beyond the dunes, unseen eyes watched, waiting, planning, counting down. The wind along Long Island's south shore carried the kind of cold that didn't just sting the skin. It settled in the bones. It was just past sunrise when the first patrol car rolled up to the narrow access road near Gilgo Beach, its headlights slicing through a pale wall of mist. Sergeant Dana Keller stepped out, boots sinking slightly into the soft sand. She had been called out to the area many times over the years, usually for lost hikers or abandoned items washed ashore. But today wasn't one of those days. Dispatch had reported a 911 call from a dog walker claiming they found something wrong, extremely wrong, and the quiver in their voice stayed with Keller long after the radio fell silent. She ducked under the low branches lining the path, moving carefully as she followed the caller's directions. Thick reeds swayed around her, their rustling blending with the distant whoosh of the Atlantic. When she reached the clearing, she saw the couple who made the call, both pale, standing together, arms crossed tightly. But they didn't speak. They simply pointed, and Keller saw it, a disturbed patch of sand, a small corner of fabric peeking through, and near it a footprint, large, heavy, deliberate. Her breath hitched. This stretch of coastline had a painful history, one Keller knew all too well. A series of disappearances, a long and exhausting search, and a community still haunted by unanswered questions. It had been years since the nation fixated on the name associated with it all. Rex Heuermann, the man authorities believed was responsible for multiple killings along this same shoreline. But this fresh disturbance wasn't part of the old investigation. Keller stepped backward, slowly, carefully avoiding the sand around the footprint. She radioed for backup, evidence markers, and the forensic team. And then she waited, watching the tide inch closer, like the ocean was trying to reclaim the ground before the truth surfaced. Within an hour, more units arrived. Detectives moved strategically. Technicians began documenting every angle. Crime scene tape fluttered as it stretched between weathered posts. And curiosity drew in onlookers, most of them whispering the same question. Is this connected? Detective Michael Rourke, one of the longest-serving investigators still tied to the original Gilgo case, arrived with a tired determination etched across his face. He glanced at Keller, then at the disturbed sand. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is," he muttered. "I hope it's not," Keller replied. "But the footprint's fresh. Maybe less than 24 hours old." Rourke lowered himself, inspecting the edges of the impression. This wasn't someone wandering around. This is someone who knew exactly where they were stepping. Keller studied his expression. "You think someone's sending a message?" Rourke didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the ocean, the fog rolling in like a curtain. "I think someone's reminding us that history doesn't stay buried." As the team worked, a piece of evidence was uncovered. A small, sealed plastic pouch partly buried just beneath the sand. No one touched it at first. The decision to remove it fell to the lead forensic tech, who carefully lifted it with gloved hands and held it up to the light. Inside was a driver's license. The name belonged to a woman, missing for just 4 days. Not long enough for a search party to form. Not long enough for the media to catch on, but long enough for her family to fear the worst. Keller exhaled sharply. She wasn't supposed to be here. She lived nearly 40 miles away. Rourke's eyes narrowed, which means someone brought her here. With the license bag and tag, detectives started reconstructing a timeline, where she was last seen, who she was last with, and any digital breadcrumbs she might have left behind. But the early facts were unsettling. Her phone had gone offline near a stretch of wooded highway. Her car was missing, and according to her roommate, she mentioned feeling like she was being followed days before she vanished. Meanwhile, officers expanded their search radius around the clearing, and within minutes, Keller's radio crackled. "Sergeant Keller, you're going to want to see this." She and Rourke exchanged glances, then hurried toward the voice calling from the dunes. The sand here was deeper, thicker, almost untouched. But at the base of one dune, partially shielded by overgrown brush, something jutted out, a piece of weathered wood. No! Several pieces, aligned too neatly to be debris. As the officers began brushing away the sand, Keller stepped back, heart pounding. It wasn't wood. It was the top edge of a box. A crate. Something intentionally buried. Rourke moved closer, lifting his flashlight. The beam cut across metal hinges, rusted but intact. "Whoever put this here didn't want it found," he said. Keller swallowed hard. Until now. The team formed a perimeter. The air thickened with tension as the sand continued to fall away, revealing more of the crate's surface. And then, something else. Painted letters. Faded but readable. A date. A date that matched one of the earlier disappearances from the original Gilgo case. Suddenly, everyone froze. Rourke whispered, This changes everything." Keller felt a cold pulse shoot through her. If this marked date was real, if this crate had been here all along, unnoticed, unsearched, then the case was far from over. And when the final layer of sand was brushed away, revealing a second date painted underneath, one from only 3 weeks prior, Keller's voice broke. "Mike, it's like someone is marking time." Rourke turned to her, face drained of color, or leaving a timeline. But just as they prepared to open the crate, a junior officer shouted from the ridge above, "Detectives, we found another one. Same markings." Keller's stomach dropped, because in that moment, the truth settling like a storm rolling across the shoreline. Someone out there wasn't hiding anymore. They were communicating. And the message had only just begun.